Well, good morning. Good to be with you this morning. As you can see, John is not here, so you got stuck with me. He's on the road to speaking in Lanigan this morning, so he asked me if I would step in for him this morning, and it was quite an honor to be asked to share on Missions Weekend. This is quite a special weekend for us at the neighborhood. And just this parade of flags of nations representing people that attend our church from all of these countries. That is significant. That is, well, it's incredible, really, when you think about it. How on Mission Sunday, God is asking us to go into all the world, and at the same time, He is bringing all the world to us. So that's just a wonderful, wonderful expression of who He is. So in speaking on missions this morning, I had been thinking about it, and I realized that in speaking on missions, I'm not really telling you anything that is new news. If you have been coming to church or you have been serving the Lord for many years or even just a few months, missions is something that we know about. So I'm not really going to be telling you anything new this morning, but my hope is that I will maybe tweak something that you know and refresh and just stimulate us all to reevaluate what missions means to us personally and here at the neighborhood. When I was first thinking about sharing this morning, I was on Facebook. Now, I know most people probably go to their Bible first, but I was on Facebook, and I saw this clip. And it can be I'm going to kind of warn you, it can be a teeny bit offensive, but I'm not meaning for it to be offensive this morning. There is truth in this little clip. And so I asked John's permission to show it, so you won't stone him, just stone me. But I think it's a good clip, because when we think of missions and when we talk outside of our walls about missions, people have a whole different idea, or many different ideas, of what missions really is. And so this little clip, to me, was maybe one of those views that we come against when we talk about missions. So I'll just get Dave to show that little clip.
Things first, I'm going to need everyone to wear this awful neon-colored t-shirt everywhere we go, because what's the point of serving in a third world country if people in America don't know we're doing it? We do not have time to help that lady with her bags, okay? The mission doesn't start until we get to the country. Does everyone have their passport? We are splitting up, guys and girls. Y'all cannot sit together on an overnight flight. Absolutely not. Does anyone in this group speak any Spanish at all? Nobody. Okay, perfect. Day 1 is going to be a rest day, okay? We need our rest. Day 2 is going to be a shopping day, all right? Your grandparents and aunts and uncles have paid a lot of money for you to come down here. What better way to say thank you than some crocodile earrings? No, you cannot buy a djembe. How are you going to get that home? Day 3 is a Sunday. We're going to go to church, all right? This is a super amazing church we're going to, but we're not going to understand anything because it's going to be in a different language. Does everyone have their passport? Day 4, you guys, is when we really get down to business. We're going to paint a school. Are there skilled painters in that country that could probably do a better job than us? Yes, there are. Does this country have high unemployment and they could probably use the work? Again, also true. Was this school painted last week by the mission team that came before us? Again, yes. But that's not important, okay? We're going to paint the school and we're going to get some photos to send back to the church. I swear, if one more person loses their passport... Listen, guys, I understand things are going to be difficult. We're going to get tired, but we must never waver from our goal to get photos with minority children for our Facebook profiles.
Some people think, when they think of missions, if you were to talk to them, that's what they think of. They think of us, just going somewhere and doing something insignificant and coming back and just patting ourselves on the back for this great thing that we've done. But that's that's not what missions is really about. It's not necessarily that picture. And so we know that the true picture, to get a true picture of missions, this is where we need to look. That this is the manual for missions. So I thought about that, and I thought, well, if that guy in the yellow T-shirt isn't the real face of missions, then what is the real face of missions? What does the face of missions, or what should the face of missions look like? So when I thought about that, I thought about automatically 3 different stories in Scripture. 3 different Bible stories came to mind. The first one that came to mind is the story of Moses. And when I thought of the story of Moses, I thought the face of missions needs to be a face of support. It needs to look like support. Moses was asked, as we all know, to lead the children of Israel, and that didn't always go so well for him. In his leadership, he came up against complaints, he came up against grumbling. He even began to question himself if God had really said what he said, if God had sent him, if God had told him. And so many times our missionaries, many times when God is laying something on our heart, even if it's to speak to a neighbor, a lot of times we begin to even question if that was that me that thought of that, or is it really God speaking? So we see that Moses even himself had these questions. But God was faithful and continued to speak to Moses and gave him a plan. And I love the fact that God gives us plans when he gives us mission. And so the plan was to take some action. And you cannot have missions without action. If you have missions without action, it's just a nice thought. That's all it is a good thought. It's not missions. Mission requires action. And so we see that Moses was given this plan, this direction, and action had to take place. And so the story goes on to say that Moses was told to raise his arm, raise his staff. And as long as he had that arm and staff in that position, the battle that was being fought was being won. But that took time. And often mission is not accomplished in one easy step. Often it takes a lot of different steps. And so we see that Moses himself began to get tired, began to get weary. And as he did, his arm began to slip down. You can almost visualize it, kind of, resting on your head and then resting on your shoulder. Finally, and so when his arm got lower and lower, what was happening out here? It looked different. The mission began to look a little different. It wasn't winning anymore. There was some defeat. Things were getting confusing. And so in order to keep God's plan for the mission, God's purpose for the mission going, something else had to happen. Support had to come along. Mission had to have the face of support. So in the story that Aaron and Hur come alongside of Moses, and they actually sat Moses down, and one stood on one side and held up one arm, and one stood on the other side and held up the other arm. And as they supported Moses, the mission was accomplished. The face of mission has to be a face of support. We have to be there to support. Many of you know that John and I just came back at the end of September from time in Liberia, and we thank our missions committee, because it was our missions committee from our church here that helped financially us to be able to go there. But we went to Liberia, and as we were there with some other pastors from our province. But the reason for going to Liberia was many years ago, there was a Liberian man, who came to Canada to get some education. And when he did that, he also came to escape conflict in his country. He was married, and his wife and he were of 2 different tribes. And I don't remember if how many remember, but there was a ethnic cleansing going on in Liberia maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago. And so he was of the tribe that was being targeted. So his wife said, you best go to Canada. And so he came to Canada, and he did some Bible schooling, and he attended our church, one of our churches in Regina. And he just became part of our community for about 3 years. And in those 3 years, God birthed a vision for him to go home and begin this ministry in his home country of Liberia, a country of where he started. If you can go to the next picture, he started a school and an orphanage. And so he began this ministry, and over time, it has grown. As you can see, the school is close to 500 students. The mission itself is about 75 children that live on campus. And so he's reaching out to the community around. And so he wanted us to come. He'd been after John for some time, for Saskatchewan to come and see what the Lord has done. And so we went. And so also, the next picture, he took us around, and you can see the blue buildings, and then he took us to this spot in the middle. And he said, this is going to be the church. Now we're reaching out to our community, and so now we want to build a church. And so you can see those blocks there, and obviously it's not quite completed. And he said, but we've run out of money. And I think these little blocks here in Liberian money are, I don't know, somewhere under 50 cents each. And so John said to him, well, how many do you need? And he kind of said how many he needed, and John kind of calculated how much that would cost. And he just said to John, that's the missionary's name, he said to him, don't worry about it. Saskatchewan will pay for the bricks. So you order them, and we'll get the walls up. So we came home, and we took up an offering here amongst our own church, the neighborhood church. And John went on to the computer and contacted our page where he communicates with the pastors of the province. And he said, let's get behind this fellow. Let's support him and see what we can do. And he challenged each of our churches to give $200. Well, $200 kept coming in and coming in and coming in and coming in. And before you know it, we were able to message John and say, the walls are paid for. But not only that, money kept coming in. And he has since been able to message him and say, you can put a roof on too while you're at it. So the church is going to be built. So by next rainy season, you can see, and there's one more picture. We were praying on the site. You can see we hit the end of rainy season. So by next rainy season, they'll be in a building with a roof. And that'll be very significant to them. But it's support. Missions has the face of support. And we need to be people that are willing to support each other in the vision, in the plan that God has. The second story I thought of for the face of missions. What does the face of missions look like? And the second story was the story of the Good Samaritan. You might wonder why this is a mission story, but it really, truly is. The face of missions has to look like the face of sacrifice. Now, we know this story. This is a parable that Jesus told. And so this is a story of a rich man. He was a Jewish man, so technically, more than likely, he was well-educated, well put together. And he's walking down a road between two cities, and he gets attacked by some muggers. He gets mugged. And he gets beat up, and he gets robbed. And Jesus says he was left by the side of the road. Now, the story goes on to say that passers-by came along. Now, I don't know how many of you live in VeggieTale land. How many of you live in VeggieTale land? Okay, all the VeggieTale people are on this side. But in VeggieTales, this is a great story. And so you have the Samaritan, you have the man on the side of the road. And then in VeggieTale land, you have Mr. Asparagus popping along. And he looks rather prestigious. He's got glasses, and and he looks really well, and he says, "Oh no!" He sees the man on the side of the road, and I couldn't possibly stop. I'm all put together. I'm in my best clothes. I'm on I have a meeting. I'm just important person, and I can't possibly stop. So he just kind of hops along, and then next thing you know, in VeggieTale land comes Mrs. Asparagus. No, I guess she's Mrs. Cucumber. I don't know what she is. Cauliflower, maybe. She's Mrs. Cauliflower, and she comes along. And she stops, and she at least sees the man and stops and looks at him, and then says, "Oh, no, I couldn't possibly help. I'm too busy." And so she sings this little song, and I sing this little song to John all the time when he asks me to do something. I sing, "Oh, no, I'm busy, terribly busy. I'm much, much too busy for you." So in VeggieTale land, we have this song. Thank you very much. So we have this song about being too busy. But that's reality, isn't it? That's sometimes the first thing that pops into our head is, "Oh, yeah. I could help, I suppose, yeah. But man, I'm busy. I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, I got to do that." So the face of missions has to have the face of sacrifice. It has to be willing to put some of that aside and get involved. And finally, in the story, you see the Good Samaritan. And the significance of that is the Samaritans were people in Bible times that were discarded. They weren't attractive. They weren't considered the upper class of life. They were the lowest of the low. And the significance of this story is Jesus has said that there was this rich man, there was this scholar, there was this upper class guy in the ditch, and a lower class guy stopped to help. And not only did he stop to help, but Scripture tells us that he bandaged him up, he cared for him, then he put him on his horse or donkey or whatever it was, took him to the next city, got him a place to stay, and said, "Take care of him. Feed him. Just look after him. Whatever it costs, I will pay." Do you think that was a sacrifice? That wasn't money that was readily available to the lowest of the low, but the lowest of the low had a sacrifice. On Tuesday mornings, we teach study here, and this Tuesday we had a little something different. We just had coffee and chat, and I had a gal come to share her story. And most of you will know her, and her name is Nicole Martini. And she came to share her story. And her story was very encouraging. It was, about her life growing up and knowing God and serving God and meeting this man, handsome man. And I said to him, last handsome short man, but met this handsome man and married him and went on to their life together. But of course, we know Dr. Martini, her husband, is the president of the Bible College. And you don't become president of a Bible college with grade 3. You might think you could be, but apparently that's not what happens. And so much of their lives were sacrificing for the education that it took, for the mission that Jeremy felt God calling him to. And so she talks about that, and that was encouraging, that was interesting, but she said something that stuck with me. And she talked about not having a lot of money, and I'm sure most of us can relate to times in our lives when things have been tight and things have not been as easy. And she said, but that was good. And sometimes we'll say that to ourselves, yeah, but that was good. It was good for us to suffer. We don't really mean it, but we say it. But she said, that was good. And she said, why it was good was because she learned how very little you can live off and still be happy. Now, we've all heard that before. We've all heard that we can all learn to live on less and we can be happy because it's not what we have that makes us happy. So it's a good lesson. But this is what she said at the end that made it stick in my heart. She said, and that, the knowledge of that, the knowledge of knowing how little you can live on and be happy, the knowledge of that is a gift. And I never thought of it that way. That it's a gift. It's a gift that God gives us in order that we can sacrifice for the cause of someone else. If you don't have that gift of knowing how little it takes to make you happy and how much you can sacrifice for others, what a gift. What a gift that is. And it's a gift. Learning how little it really takes to live and still be happy is a gift. And I pray that God will give us each today that gift and allow us to see that face of missions, the face of sacrifice. The third face that came to me, the third story that came to me in Scripture, is the words of Jesus himself. And this would be the face of missions. Here is surrender. From the words of Jesus himself in Mark, we read, go, preach the gospel. From the words of Jesus himself in Matthew, we read, go, make disciples. The face of missions has to be a face of surrender. Not living a life all about ourselves, but being willing to put ourselves down and to surrender whatever and wherever God leads. We all sing that chorus, it's all about you, Jesus, it's not about me. We've sung it here before. And I remember one service being here, and I was sitting over there, and we were singing that chorus, it's all about you, Jesus, it's not about me. We sung it over a few times, and I was getting into it more and more and more. And I love worship, so I was getting into it and, had my eyes closed and was just kind of zoning out of everybody else around me and just zoning into this song. And all of a sudden, I heard these words come out of my mouth. I heard these words say, it's not about you, Jesus. It's all about me. And as soon as I heard those words, I just, oh my goodness, what a time to get my words mixed up. Oh, and then I had to laugh at myself, but then I felt, like a tweak, like, oh my goodness, out of the heart, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So I thought, oh Lord, please don't make that true in my life. But I'm not the only one who's gotten those words mixed up. If you confess, I'm sure many of you have gotten them mixed up yourselves. And if you haven't sung them, you've thought them. It's not about you. It's all about me. And when we live that way, we cannot live in the face of surrender. We cannot give all that we need to do. There are two missionary stories that I reflect on. And one would be Mark and Huldah Buntain. I'm not sure many of you here would know that name anymore, but when I was growing up, that was a big name in missions. And we do have their story in our library if you want to take out that story of Mark and Huldah Buntain. But Mark and Huldah Buntain were a young couple, and they lived in Watrous, Saskatchewan, newlyweds with one new baby. And God called them to the great city of Calcutta, India. So the story is they got on a ship and sailed for weeks across the ocean and arrived in Calcutta, India. And there they began from scratch to build a mission. And the stories are incredible that Huldah writes down. Mark has since passed away and is buried in Calcutta, but Huldah is in her early 90s. and she still just can tell you these stories, and her book is in the library, and there's wonderful stories of God's provision and God's mission of support, of sacrifice, and then of surrender. But they labored there in Calcutta, and as you know, we took a missions team to Calcutta just over a year ago now, and we were there and we saw with our own eyes. We saw the massive church that has been built that seats thousands. It has 8 or 9 services going on at one time in different dialects. It's just amazing. They don't have one school. They have many schools. They have a university. They have hospitals. They don't have just a hospital. They have a nursing where you can train to be a nurse. It's just amazing. Calcutta has become Mark and Huldah Buntain. It's amazing. So many of you have heard of them. We've gone and seen it with our own eyes. There's a book in the library. And sometimes that's what we think of when we think of mission. We think of, oh, that great out there somewhere, that it's not something. Well, I'm willing to support, and I'm willing to give, but am I really willing to surrender? Then there's another missionary I think of. Her name is Mrs. Bussey. Now, Mrs. Bussey was a lady I grew up with. Now, the scary part is, I'm talking to my mother just to get the story straight. My mother reminded me that she was 60, Mrs. Bussey was 68 when this story takes place. And looking back, I thought she was 168. And considering I'm 63, the story gets even scarier. But I assure you I'm 63, not 163, for those of you that are 15 and under. So Mrs. Bussey was a dear lady in our church, and back in those days, there wasn't the social structure that we have now. And so Mrs. Bussey was widowed. Her husband died, and there wasn't any money left, and so she kind of went from pillar to post. She rented a room here and rented a room there. She didn't even have enough money, my mom said, to rent her own apartment. She just basically was renting rooms. And at one point, she must have been in between places, and my mother took her in, and she was sleeping on our couch. And so Mrs. Bussey was there, and, as a young girl, you don't really think of these things, why people are there, why people are gone. You just kind of accept the reality. And so Mrs. Bussey disappeared. So I just assumed she'd, found somewhere else to live. And it was years later that I actually heard the story. Mrs. Bussey, a beautiful Christian lady, had decided she just didn't want to sleep on a couch for her remaining days. So she found a missionary in Africa that she could go over and serve. And Mrs. Bussey surrendered and went to Africa and cleaned floors, washed dishes, did the laundry, looked after children, swept the floor, did whatever she needed to do to help the missionary that she was living with. And she did that for 5 years. She came back in her early 70s to Montreal. That's Mrs. Bussey. How many here have heard of Mrs. Bussey? Not too many. Well, nobody except for me. How many heard of Huldah Buntain? Quite a few more people have heard of her. What do you think God's heard of? Has he heard of Huldah and Mark Buntain? Sure has. Has God heard of Mrs. Bussey? Sure has. The heart of surrender. Missions will always look different. It'll always have a different look for whoever God is calling. But it has to have the same heart. It has to have a heart of surrender. So here at the neighborhood, this is what our face of missions looks like. These are the people that are part of our church, part of our body. Some of them attend our church while working in mission in the city. Others come home and they visit us. But this is our church. This is the face of missions. These are the faces that we represent. These are the faces that we support. These are the faces that we sacrifice for. And we are the faces of surrender along with them to doing the great mission that God has called us all to, whether that be across the world or across the street. It still is the same heart, the heart and the face of mission. We have a video from Pastor Jason. I think that many of you might remember him. He was on staff with us about 12 years ago.
This is Jason Shepard, one of the directors of Mission 180, here on site at Mission 180 Children's Homes at Kona Baridi, on the edge of the Ngong Hills here in Kenya. I arrived back from Canada 2 days ago, narrowly escaped winter, and I've returned to rainy season. The skies behind me are dark, the rains are falling, and it's good. They're much needed. I want to turn around this camera and just give you a 360-degree view of the property here in Kenya. I want you to see a little bit about how your generous contributions to Mission 180 are making a difference here in Kenya. The children are all down for a nap right now, so I don't have the ability to show you some of the kids, but I want you to see at least this property. And I want to say personally, thank you so much for your giving to Mission 180, and thank you for your giving to missions in general. You're making an impact around the world in the various different ministries that you are supporting. And here from Kenya, we want to say a very, very sincere thank you. Please take ownership of the work that you're doing. We can't do what we do unless you do what you do. And so we're so grateful for your generosity and ask you to continue giving to the work of the Lord, both at home in the neighborhood church and in Saskatoon and the Lawson Heights area, and also beyond around the world through your missions giving. Thank you so much. Let me turn this camera around and show you a little bit about Mission 180. So here we are. Just do a 360-degree turn from where I'm standing. You can see this is our sea container turned office. There's my pickup truck. You can see that it's the muddy, rainy season. Here is our water tanks. We pump water from our well up to these water tanks, and then it gravity feeds down to our children's homes. In the background are the Ngong Hills, the clouds rolling down over the hills there. It's beautiful, even though it's cloudy and rainy. It's a beautiful place to be. Here's one of the new gardens. We probably have a total of 3 acres of garden growing. The cows are enjoying the green grass today. And then as I pan around, you can see the children's homes, the play structure. This is Mission 180. Here, 46 children call this place home. 38 staff have gainful, beneficial employment so they can take care of their families. These children are so well taken care of. So much love, so much happiness and joy here. I wish you could all come and be a part of my greeting every time I show up, and you would see and you would hear the happiness and the love that's happening in this place. And it's all because of good folks like you. There on that fence line, that's a brand new fence. It's been constructed in the last month. A special project that was much needed and again was accomplished because of the generosity of folks like yourselves. May God bless you as you continue to give to the work of missions, both here in Kenya with Mission 180 and all the other different missions organizations and missionaries that you're supporting. God bless you all.
Amen. The fascinating part about that clip is for those of you that have been in the neighborhood 15 years ago, and Jason was part of our staff, know that none of that existed. That was birthed out of a mission, birthed here at the neighborhood, and Jason took that mission and went with it, and we alongside supported him and the great work they're doing there. So I think we have a slide on our offering. These are our budgets for our missions, and you can see there that today we needed about $840, and I'm sure between the 3 venues we reached that. So you're not off the hook, though, because our missions budget for the whole year is on the other side, and that is just under $30,000. So we still have a ways to go. And it would be wonderful if we could reach that and go above that. Because when we have the ability to go above, our missions committee then is able to perhaps reach specific needs of targeted areas. Maybe there's a missionary who is going through some difficulties and needs a little extra something. And so we're able to go beyond what we have budgeted for them and give them that much more in support. So what does that call on our part? Well, it calls us then to sacrifice, doesn't it? And then to sacrifice what we normally maybe would put in other areas, to sacrifice that in order to bless our global workers and our mission around the world. And it truly does have to come from a heart of surrender. Because no matter if you are serving in one of those lands, in one of those places that was highlighted from our missions, in one of these places, whether you are serving, doesn't matter where you are, in the country, around the world, or sitting here in the seat. The mission looks different, but the heart has to be the same.